And you can imagine when I was leaving Quebec that those people in Quebec were a little nervous, and they used to tell me, whatever they offer you, Jean, same thing here.
Jean Béliveau was every inch the matinee idol. His wedding in the spring of 1953, the social occasion of the year. When he finally signed with Montreal, it was recorded as a historic event. It was said that at the time there were two religions in Quebec, Catholicism and the Canadiens. Béliveau joined a team of larger-than-life heroes with a tremendous following from the first day in uniform until the day they retired.
Vous êtes pour nous un bon exemple de continuer.
After 18 years as a player, now almost as long a team executive, Béliveau is still the very picture of the man whose elegance on the ice won 10 Stanley Cups.
It's the heart that counts.
Yeah, that's what they told me every time.
That's right.
C'est vrai.
Led by Béliveau and inspired by Richard, the Montreal Canadiens of the late 1950s may have been the greatest hockey team ever. Their names and faces still vivid after all these years.
Jeffrey On, Moore, Marshall, Johnson, Klon, Cole Blake, and you see Tom Foley with Mr. Selke and Senator Molson.
It was a simpler time in sport, when you kissed your wife goodbye at the station and found your berth in the Pullman car, and when the most exotic place you had to go for a game was Chicago. They still come to the Forum.
If you would have been
Doug Harvey,
you could have got the 7.
and Dickie Moore,
You mean I had to work?
and Henri Richard to compare age and weight and to try to count their Stanley Cups.
34, 34, 40. I got 5. 40? So it's 40. Yeah, but I got mine with different teams.
3 different teams. If you wouldn't have played so well in Chicago, we would have had another one.
Yeah.
But it would have still added up to the same. What are you going to do? It would have been the same. Only I would have had the money in my pocket instead of yours.
Yeah, it would be good.
You broke the string, eh?
But I was going good that year, you know. I had a young bride, and it was giving me whatever. I've just got to tell the truth.
And the ocean.
You understand that? I do.
For these men, it was the best of times, but in a way, also the worst. They won 5 consecutive Stanley Cups, a feat accomplished neither before nor since. But for the men who followed, for anything less than the Stanley Cup, there was no excuse.
In my case, I remember coming out of the Forum after a hockey game here, after scoring 2 goals, and you could hear some people, well, you could have scored 3. And on some night I scored 3, we could have scored 4, and I was lucky enough to score 4 on a few occasions, and I could have scored 5. So you have the feeling that whatever you do, it's not enough. It's hard.
À la fleur. Et il marque! Well, Lafleur's Lafleur, and that's to put it plainly. Lafleur did it all. He come up the ice with full speed. They left the puck for him. He gets it into Lemaire. Back to Lafleur. Guy Lafleur turns this place into a frenzy again. What could be more appropriate if anyone...
10 Canadiens goals scored by number 10, Guy Lafleur.
Jean Béliveau played for the Montreal Canadiens until the age of 40. A generation later, and 7 years younger, the last of the Canadiens' crown jewels, Guy Lafleur, has announced that he too will retire. When he was Lafleur's age, Béliveau still had 5 Stanley Cups to win. But today, for Lafleur, there are the eulogies that only great athletes get to hear.
He was a player that displayed individual talents, but never forgot about his teammates and his hockey team. And anytime you win 6 Stanley Cups, that's a great honor. And I think Lafleur was one of the best that played, and very, very great gentleman off the ice.
Wayne Gretzky.
C'est lui, Wayne.
He can still skate like the wind, but with 2 goals in his last 43 games, the magic, the most important part, has gone.
Well, I never doubted in my mind that I was not able to score 40 or 50 goals again. It was tough enough to read the paper or heard people talking, when you're going to get out of your slump, things like that. So that's why I decided to retire. It's one of the reasons why.
The Lafleur story is in many ways a modern Canadian fable, which begins in the town of Thurso, Quebec. Growing up here, your future lay somewhere between 3 main landmarks: the paper mill, the hockey rink, and the Catholic Church.
Well, like the rest of the kids today, when they're 6, 7, 8 years old, I remember I was an altar boy, and I wanted to be a priest, but it's a good thing I changed my mind because I was there in the morning and we missed class, and that was the only reason why I was an altar boy. But when the priest was a close friend to our family at that time, and he came here and said, how much time you have to go to school to be a priest? And when he told me, I said, forget it.
So Guy Lafleur made another choice, and now the road which leads to the Thurso Arena is Guy Lafleur Boulevard. When Lafleur was 9 years old, as his son Martin is now, on Friday nights he'd sleep in his equipment, skates next to the bed, and early Saturday morning he'd sneak into the darkened rink by himself through a hole in the arena wall.
You had the ice for yourself alone. There's nobody around you, and you were able to practice shooting the puck off the board, where the puck's going to go. And I kept that till the day I decided to retire, because even at the Forum, I was there an hour before everybody, so just to get practice.
At the age of 10, wearing Jean Beliveau's number 4, he was the star of the Quebec Pee Wee tournament. The dream of one day becoming a Montreal Canadien already firmly fixed in his imagination.
It's always been my team, because Jean Beliveau was my idol, and Henri Richard, Cournoyer, Jean-Claude Tremblay at that time. They were all guys that I was watching every night. You know, every time they played, I was watching them, and especially Jean Beliveau.
Like Beliveau before him, Guy Lafleur set out to make hockey not just his job or his career, but his life. He too was the preeminent junior in Quebec City and in the country. The rink built for Beliveau, again full for Lafleur. But Guy Lafleur was a different kind of player than Beliveau. And in hockey, these were different times. No longer did the top prospects in Quebec belong by divine right to the Montreal Canadiens. But if not by divine right, then maybe by a little divine inspiration. 3 years before Lafleur was eligible to join the NHL, Montreal had traded for the draft choice they'd used to get him.
From the Quebec Rampart, Guy Lafleur.
Just a week before, Jean Beliveau had announced he'd played his final game.
People were expecting me to replace Jean Beliveau because he just retired, and I'm sure if it wouldn't have been for the publicity that I had, they would have sent me to Halifax. People expect me to score 50 goals the first year. I had to go through the system because I had to learn their style, and it took me 3 years.
Guy Lafleur learned well in those years. He went on to score 50 goals 6 times and to win 5 Stanley Cups.
I remember when I first came up, we're always been brought up with veteran guys, 12, 15 years old, guys who won the Stanley Cup, who knew what kind of feeling it was to win. And when you got too many young players on the team, it's tough to explain what it is to win the Stanley Cup.
Guy Lafleur became the most exciting player since Rocket Richard.
Every time I started the season, I used to put myself a goal. You know, I would like to have a 100-point season, things like that. Win a Stanley Cup. I didn't ask for 5, but I was asking for 1, and I won 5, and championship of the league 3 times, and I won most of the teams except for 1, the Lady Byng, but it's not too bad. But I'm very happy about it, and I didn't maybe have enough motivation at the end too, you know. I said because I had everything that I wanted.
Even for a great player like Guy Lafleur, retirement comes too soon. In any other field, he'd be in his prime. In hockey, his career is over. And it's more difficult for a man with the passion of Lafleur, who once said he sometimes felt his sport was more important than his family.
I always say what I had in mind, and I heard maybe my family, my wife, but she knew anyway that the way I was, and hockey was first. It was my career, it was my bread and butter, and I know it's not nice to say that, but to me it was very important that I concentrate myself on something that made me what I am today, and what gave me a lot of things, you know. Hockey was, I don't know, it was like it was part of me. For me, it was my dream when I was a kid, and it's still, I look back, and it's like a dream.
Mesdames et messieurs, ladies and gentlemen, Monsieur Aurel Joliat.
It just felt like as if I'd like to start all over again, you know?
He's okay. They made him tough, but they made this man.
then when I had the big acclaim, all of a sudden I